let me just preface this by saying that I am a casino slot technician. So I repair shit like this professionally. And I'm doing it for a casino. So if I make even one mistake, if I am not perfectly on the ball with what I am doing, I am fired faster than Marty McFly when Needle's trying to get him to do, they'd send me faxes all over the house. You're fired, you're fired, you're fired. They'd get a billboard. They'd say, you're fired, John. It's over if I make a mistake. So I'm telling you, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to these video game consoles, because I am also a video game console collector. I have almost every popular console that's ever been released. I don't have Turbo, and I don't have Sega Saturn. But that's more out of lack of interest than it is, anything else. I prefer the older stuff, the 2600, the NES, the Genesis, the Super Nintendo, the Game Boy line. Stuff like that. That's my sweet spot. That's where I'm at. I do have things like the Wii, the GameCube, the N64, multiple Famicoms. I've restored a lot of these from broken condition. In fact, right now I'm actually working on a Sega Genesis, my childhood Sega Genesis, because it's crapped out. Now, the thing is, this article is absolutely correct about some things, but the severity of these things is greatly overstated. It is definitely a fluff piece, so to speak. And we're going to go into it. So he starts off, waxing philosophic about being old. Everything put together falls apart is kind of sage-like adage that you often hear elderly relatives offering over the age. Okay, so I don't care about any of that. That's nonsense. That is absolutely true. Otherwise, I would not have a job. If you're anything like me, you've got a sizable collection of treasured retro systems. Yes, I do. Ranging right back from your childhood. First love was, how are you almost 40 and you only have a Genesis? My first console was the NES and I'm 28. It's sitting right there. How does that even work? Maybe he just got into it late. Who cares? While I'm keenly aware of the fragility of optical media, and yes, it is fragile, CD-based consoles will stop working faster than the cartridge-based ones by a matter of decades, probably. Optical media and sensitive hardware requires read discs. I've always labored under the impression that anything cartridge-based is near invincible, and is still going to be good working order when I'm touching 80, and that's not wrong. If you take care of it, hell, I'm convinced the capacitors in my NES will never need to be changed. I know that's bullshit, but, it's insane. At which point, I'll no doubt be getting comments from Elijah Wood-style punks mocking me. Okay, that's Back to the Future. Fine, you're funny. My recent wake-up call came as I put together my review for the superb analog Mega SG, an FPGA-based clone system that accurately replicates the performance of Sega's Mega Drive/Genesis, right down to the point where it's possible to connect the system to the Mega CD, or here in the United States, it would be the Sega CD. It's at this point I was given a sobering lesson on how vintage hardware is slowly but surely dying. And what's fascinating to me is that immediately he mentions that optical media-based hardware doesn't work or won't work in the future. Now, I also notice that the model of Sega CD that he's using here is notorious for having bad caps. It absolutely notorious for... It's like the Famicom disk system, if you're familiar with that. That one has problems with the belt. Well, these have problems with the caps. Sega did not buy good caps. Nintendo went with Nichikan for almost all of the caps in the NES. Nichikan capacitors are by far the best you could get at that time. Sega, I don't have this model of Sega CD, so I couldn't tell you what the problem is with it, caps-wise. Just change them out. That's it. It's easy. Anybody can change a capacitor. I could teach my grandmother, if she were still alive, how to change a capacitor in less than a day. And she could do it. It's... If you can drive a car, you can change a capacitor. If you can wipe your butt, you can change a capacitor. If you can play a video game like Red Dead Redemption 2, you can not only change a capacitor, but you could probably do anything. I mean, like, I don't understand the sentiment here. Now, let's go back to where we were, because he's saying his Sega CD doesn't work. The Mega SG and the Mega CD simply refuse to play nice with one another, and for one brief moment I actually assumed this was the fault of Analog's brand new system. Could very well have been. The foolishness of which really hits home as I type it out. I mean, it could have been either one. I don't see why it's a problem. It could, I mean... I tried to play a copy of Tetris in my retro USB AVS. It wasn't the AVS's, or it wasn't Tetris's fault. It was the AVS's fault because it wasn't compatible with that type of cartridge pinout. They fixed the problem. They even sent me a free cartridge connector to mitigate the problem. But the fact of the matter is, this stuff, Analog system as well as the Sega CD, aren't perfect, either one of them. So I don't see why it's foolish to believe that something brand new wouldn't work. I mean, I have Xbox 360 consoles that don't work. And I have an Atari 2600, and television. Those still work just fine. So it's really, it has nothing to do with age. It has nothing to do with make or model. I mean, at work, there are slot machines that we literally just installed 10 days ago, going bad already, while the stuff made in 1997 still plugging on like no problem. Age ain't a thing. It doesn't matter. Manufacturing process is what matters, and frankly, the newer stuff isn't manufactured as well. It's placing the blame on the system that had just rolled off the production line. Once again, that's nonsense. It doesn't matter if it's rolled off the production line or not. In my defense, the Mega CD works fine with my original Mega Drive. Then it is a problem with your fucking... Excuse me. But this fact was simply masking problems which needed addressing, and fast. Well, yeah. I mean, if the Analog Mega SG is pulling more power, or is not up to spec with the Genesis, then it's not... You can't expect it to run. I mean, there are so many things... Even when I approach Simon Locke, I have no idea who that is. He's followed him on Twitter for years, though, and thinks he's got a fascinating document of retro repair jobs he's undertaken. Well, that's good. Alright. I was still of the opinion that my beloved Sega CD, I'm just going to call it Sega CD because I can't get past this. This is a dumb name. Might be to blame. It was perhaps more down to it being hardware revision that the folks at Analog hadn't encountered previously, hence the weird issues. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's not unreasonable at all. All it took was a few photos of the inside of the Mega CD, snapped at Locke's behest. It totally destroyed that mindset and sent me spiraling down a rabbit hole of retro gaming despair. Locke is, for want of a better term, a technological wizard. He has repaired countless machines over the past few years, many of which were seemingly destined for the scrap heap. He's got a fondness for Sega's 90s hardware and has resurrected Famicom, Famicom Disk System, Twin Famicom, Neo Geo AVS, MVS, Master System, PC Engine Duo, Mega... We get it, okay? He's good. He can solder. He can change caps out. He's a genius. Now, I mean, maybe, oh my god. See, this is what I'm talking about. Good lord, that is... Oh boy. I didn't look at these photos on my computer. I read this on my phone. So I didn't really get to see these pictures up close. My screen on my phone is completely spidered out. Like, I drop my phone all the time. So it's destroyed. Um, that is definitely not good. This specifically, um, yeah. I mean, that's could the thing is, when you have things like flux on the board, like the NES, when you open up an NES, more often than not, you're gonna see a lot of like stains on it, on the board, because the people who were building it at the time left a lot of flux just sitting on the board, ready to eat away the traces. Though, thank God it hasn't. I mean, I haven't ever cleaned the flux off of my NES board. The Genesis that I was working on earlier, it also has the same thing, just a lot of flux. I mean, if you're really worried about it, it's been 35 years on some of this stuff, go clean it off. I honestly don't see. I mean, if it was actually a problem, it would have already reared its head. It looks like here, I don't know. I mean, what am I looking at? Okay, so these, wow, this is corrosion of a unbelievable. I mean, I don't really get a good image here, but I can see this pad here is done. I mean, maybe you could sand it down and just hard. I don't care. There's things to do that you could fix that. I mean, that doesn't look too horrible. I mean, there's that. But I don't know what I'm looking at, really. I mean, this is, what's this? I mean, okay, that's really bad. That's battery acid or something right there. And then this, you just reflow that. You maybe just replace this whole thing. Just replace that cap there. And then, oh, that is, Jesus. Yeah, that's a leaky cap right there. That's electrolytes. Well, actually, this isn't an electrolytic capacitor as far as I know. I don't work with these types of caps, so I could be completely wrong. I don't even remember what those types of caps are called. But yeah, this looks bad. I will say that. It's a difficult pill to swallow, especially when you're perfectly possible to find an Atari. Yes, it is, and I've mentioned that, and it works, and it will continue to work. There is one ceramic capacitor in there that could ruin the video output. That's the only problem I've ever found with Atari 2600s. Every other thing works. I don't know how long. I mean, maybe in 10 years I'll find one that doesn't. But every Atari 2600 I've run across, and there's been a lot of them, it's either been some idiot ruined one of the cables I'm sorry, some idiot frayed the cable coming out of the back, or in one case, all I had to do was reflow the solder on the power jack connector, and it worked. So, surface mount technology, electrolytic capacitors from the late 80s to mid to late 90s era hardware are one of the most common problems. This design over through-hole package. See, this is a surface mount capacitor right here. This is not through-hole. So a through-hole capacitor will go through one of these to the other side. You then solder it in and clip the tip. This, I mean, yeah, he's right. If you do not replace a surface mount capacitor and it does this, it's going to be really hard to get it working again. And this is what I mentioned earlier. The capacitors in the Sega CD Model 1 are horrible. They're absolutely the worst kind you can get. It's the same problem with the Game Gear. It's the same problem with the Turbo Express. They just don't last. I don't know if those are I don't know if those are surface mount on those other two machines, but they're definitely here. At least a few of them. I mean, I see two. Wait, is that the same? No, this is a different part of the board than here. So these, Jesus. Ay. Anyway, surface mount technology, SMT, SMD. Why do you need to just fucking say surface mount capacitors? This design overthrew whole packages of the air, improved upon assembly times, and allowed for further assembly automation. Sadly, this design has limitations with the smaller package size. Due to the dielectric fluid is prone to becoming more volatile over time. Leak protection was not as reliable as it is today. That's why you change them now. I mean, again, it's not hard. It causes the fluid to leak out into the PCB, which will destroy the copper traces. Yes, I know. Not gonna. This article is really verbose for some reason. This can lead to breaks in the circuit. Yes, okay, so, like, imagine you have your TV plugged into the wall, and somebody comes by and pours sulfuric acid on the cable. The cable melts away. That's what he's saying. He's saying that the surface mount traces, copper or whatever, I've never actually gone that deep. I have repaired traces, but this is a long process. It sucks. Basically, you're breaking a connection, and if even one connection breaks, it's done. This particular issue is present inside my Mega CD. Locke likened it to the impact of pouring tiny metered dosages of full sugar Coca-Cola onto the circuit board. I don't see why. That doesn't make... I use Coca-Cola on battery terminals to clean them, so what are you... yeah, you don't want Coke on your circuit board, but I don't see it being nearly as corrosive as to copper anyway. Yeah, it gets rid of battery buildup, but come on, man. Yeah, like I said, it's not good, but I can't imagine Coca-Cola would be any more corrosive to a board than flux. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should test that out. Batteries found inside certain consoles can cause problems if left unattended. These also break down with their contents, being highly volatile as time goes on. Many systems have batteries mounted above or soldered directly onto the board, which means when it fails, the contents will spill out onto the board. That's incorrect. If the battery is left in a heated, high heat area, then perhaps it will burst. I have never seen a game cartridge or a game console in my let's slot machines use batteries just like these consoles, including the ones from the 90s. I have never in my life seen a battery burst the way he's talking about if you're actually taking care of your equipment. If you have a machine left in the sun or something like that, or somebody puts sometimes AA batteries will burst like that, yes. But these little coin cell batteries, in my entire career, I have never seen that happen. I have been collecting retro games for over a decade, and I open every single one to ensure that the quality of the cartridge is, good and all well and good. I make sure the pins are clean. I make sure the batteries are fine. This is something you need to do if you're going to be buying this equipment. You check every day or every time you buy something, and then if you find a problem, I just bought a copy of Donkey Kong 94 for the Game Boy. I didn't need the game. I'm going to just flip the game, but what I'm going to do is ensure that the battery works. So you turn on the game. Oh shit, I can't save. So you open up the thing and you look and you're like, okay, the battery doesn't work, and you take it out. If you are leaving this stuff on the shelf for so long that your batteries are quote-unquote spilling out onto the board, then you don't need to have this stuff because you're not using it. You don't know what you have well enough to take care of it. Again, it is incredibly unlikely that that'll ever happen. I've never seen it in my time as a slot technician and as a retro gaming collector. I've never seen a battery in a console or a game burst the way he's describing. I've seen them fail many times. Many times. I mean, every copy of Pokemon Gold version has a failed dead battery in it. That's just a fact. You have to change them when you get it. But here he's saying that literally any time well, maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but it sounds to me like he's saying every time a battery dies, the contents of that battery will spill out, and, obviously that'll cause some problems for the traces on the board at best. At worst, it could eat through the board. Presumably. I don't know. Once these have failed, the system will either function incorrectly or not at all. Yeah, if you can't save your game, you need to change the battery. Voltage regulators can also fail over time, mostly due to the amount of heat they produce during normal use. Okay, well then measure, if you're playing your NES and you notice that, when you touch it, it's super hot, then you need to change out the 7805. And it's not hard. Well, actually, it's a little harder than on, a Sega Genesis Model 1, which actually has 2 of them. But, yeah, you just change it. They still make 7805s today. Go get it. They make better than, you could just change it out with one of the more modern ones and probably expand the life of your console even further because there's less, noise to them. I don't know. This is ridiculous. This whole article is oh my god, these basic... It's okay, imagine you had an article, don't drive your car, you might have to change your oil at some point. This is what this article is. Okay, let's keep going. Voltage regulators can also fail over time, mostly due to the amount of heat they produce during normal use. A favorite found in the yes, the 7805, as I mentioned before, which takes typically 8... Yes, it outputs 5 volt. I was about to say, what the hell are you talking about? And then I was like, oh yeah, duh. Yeah, it's a 5 volt output. And that's part of what people are like, oh no, these flash carts are going to kill your console because they output 3.3 volt and these consoles are 5 volt. That is absolutely true. It's probably not going to happen. But, I mean, it theoretically could. Just be careful. But this is part of why they say that, because a lot of those consoles have either 1 or 2 7805s in them. The Game Boy, I don't know. I don't think the Game Boy's on that list, though. The system's internal NEC parts of this type are particularly replaced on site due to their build age and operational life. When this part begins to fail, voltage outputs can go crazy. Yes, when it fails, then they can fail open. There's no output, or they can fail closed. The output goes to ground, or worse. What's going to happen is this fails, and you've got 12 volt DC going through what should take 5 volt, and it could blow things up. That is absolutely something that you want to consider. But prior to failure, you're gonna notice some problems before outright gone. At least in my experience, when it's gone, I mean, it's not just like a flip of the switch. The thing gets super hot. You can look at it with a what am I thinking? A thermal camera, and you can see, oh god, it's way more than usual. Okay, so when it fails, they can fail. Okay, so I already talked about that. Areas of a system that have a high exposure to heat cause more rapid wear on the perishable components, such as electrolytic capacitors. That's true. Some systems have these capacitors positioned right next to the voltage regulators. Yes, like the power filter capacitor on the NES is very close to the 7805. Maybe it's not a power filter. I don't know. It's a 2200 microfarad capacitor, though. And it's very close to the voltage regulator. Though, again, I've yet to replace one. I did on a Famicom just out of, curiosity. Like, will this improve the picture? And it didn't. This was a long time ago. Which are very prone to causing localized component failure. Very prone. Okay. Right. We're not out of the woods yet either. Oh, Jesus. As well as the tech found inside your console, the power supplies that's used to bring life can cause serious problems as the years roll by. There's a school of thought which dictates that you should only use original manufacturer supplied external power supply units with the system it was shipped with, or an authorized replacement. Whilst this is true for many systems at the time of manufacture, though not all, the Amstrad GX 4000 being a notable example, I have no fucking clue what that is. um, these also experience age and heat-related component failure, with the result causing damage to systems they are used with. I would advocate not using the original external PSU for systems produced in the 90s or earlier unless it has been fully serviced by a qualified professional. I guess. I mean, I see where he's coming from, but I do it. I mean, my 2600, I use a brand new one. Never had a problem. Brand new as in manufactured this decade. He's not wrong. I mean, yeah, maybe, but you want to make sure that all the specs meet or exceed the original, and generally, because of how old they are, yeah, they're probably going to fail, and they're really not worth fixing because I mean, there's still, people are going to be making, like, you could buy a phone at Walmart right now, like a home phone system, and it'll probably come with a power cable that would be sufficient to use with the NES. I mean, it might, because I'm not going to go into it, but the NES is incredibly resilient when it comes to taking random power cables. Your mileage may vary with stuff like the Genesis, but I mean, my area of expertise by far is the NES, and that's, I mean, yeah, it's true. It's true. You wanna get a good power supply. You wanna make sure you use the best one you can find, so as to keep everything clean, everything good. You don't want to have extra stuff causing, extra wear and tear. I'm trying to put that in as best English as I can. We've already touched upon some issues with the optical media-based systems, but it's worth highlighting that often problems with CD and DVD-based consoles are more likely to do with moving parts than the actual laser which reads the disc. Yes, that's true. Typically, if you look up a system with a moving parts, the word maintenance will be mentioned. The same is true for mechanical optical drive systems. Yes, lubricants perish over time. Plastic becomes more resistive to movement, and belts driving the system also perish under the increased strain. Maintain your stuff. What commonly gets attributed to laser failure is more often than not a mechanical issue rather than an electronic component one. Yes, that's true. Original grease can break down into a tacky or even resin-like compound, resulting in significant wear on the parts of the system unless serviced, including belts, guide rails, and tracking motors. That's true. The final issue is one of the more squeamish among that you might want to avoid reading. If you store a console for a long enough dormant, something is going to make a nice new home for their offspring, says Locke with a grin. No. What? What? You're saying that bugs are gonna move in? Are bugs gonna move into my Genesis? Are you fucking kidding me? Hold on. I'm so sorry. You gotta be shitting me right now, okay? Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. There are bugs all over where I live. I live in a desert. There are black widows, scorpions, mosquitoes. Anything that's alive in this desert will bite you, it will sting you, or it will poke you in some unpleasant way, whether it be foliage, bugs, or animals. And yet, whenever I have to go into the storage containers at work, which for all intents and purposes should be infested with scorpions, black widows, tarantulas, anything, because they're dark, cold, during the winter anyway. They're dark, they're cold, they're free of sunlight. You'd think that when I'm going in, because oftentimes I will have to go into these storage containers which are located outside the casino, and I will go in and I'll grab parts from the broken down machines. Now you would think that these broken down machines would be perfect for, bugs to live in, but in all my time of doing this, I've never had a bug or even seen a spider web inside these machines. Now, outside the machines, all over the place. Spider webs everywhere. But I'm telling you right now, if you have bugs living in your Sega Genesis or your Nintendo or your Atari, clean your fucking house. You understand me? Because if I live in a desert filled with the most horrific animals and the most horrific bugs you can imagine, Google what a camel spider is if you want to see some shit. Because those are all over the place. I could probably crawl under a tree right now and find one of those bastards, and oh my god. You don't want it. Never in my life, in all my time of living out in this desert, have I found any creepy crawlies in any consoles. Now, I don't live in Europe. Maybe that's a strictly European thing. I don't know how clean they are. I don't know what their climate's like. I've never been to Europe. But you are not going to find insects or arachnids in your game consoles here in the Southern California desert. I can tell you that much. Or worse. I don't know what could be worse. Snakes? Are there snakes in my PlayStation 2? Is that what you're trying to say? Oh, I see. Okay. I misinterpreted that entirely. This is a common discovery for systems stored in attics, garages, and sheds. No, it's not. Where human presence is inconsistent. I just explained to you that it's not. Maybe I'm just an anomaly. Again, 10 years of collecting games, grabbing consoles out of filthy boxes. Just the worst. My Sega Genesis, my Model 1, high-definition graphics, non-TMMS Sega Genesis, came out of a box filled with, caulking guns and stuff like that. Okay? I picked it up, it had caulk on it. I had to clean it off. But it did not have spiders in it. I promise. Jeez, I'm crow. Okay, now he's gonna go on. Storage is ironically another thing that can damage your console. We may assume that a classic system tucked away in an attic or garage is safe and sound. Is often far from the truth. Storing your devices outside of a consistent room temperature environment can lead to issues. Yes, I brought that up, Bert. Excuse me, I'm drinking Monster Energy drink here. Now, as I was saying before, or as I was reading before, when you store your game consoles, you want to make sure that it's in a consistently unlit between, 90 and 60 degrees place. If you have fluctuating temperatures, things go bad. Now he's gonna go in and talk about how shit gets yellow. Look at this. See that? I don't know if that's supposed to be the color of the Amstrad. I'm sorry. This looks like an Atari 800 XL. Excuse me. I probably should not be that color. Or you're looking at. Oh God, that is a horrible looking. Is that a top loader? No, that's a Famicom. It's blue. That's a different board than my Famicom. Mine's a detached right here. Let's look at this. Yeah, I'm pretty convinced this article at this point is just clickbait or something made to stir up shit. This isn't. Oh yeah, well it is a Famicom. It's got the DB15 on it. DE15, I don't remember. But look, this is not how you find consoles out in the wild ever. This is what you find when you're like digging. Like I found a Sega Dreamcast that had been left out in the rain for like 5 years, in the sun for like 5 years. And I'll tell you, not only was the battery inside not blown up, but it didn't look like this. What is this? What is this? This looks like, honestly, I don't reckon. There's a battery though, and look, it's not blown up. What is this? Toshiba? That's socketed? Why is that socketed? I guess that's... Was this an MVS? It's SNK something. And then here we have our classic, looks like Sega CD, based on that. It's Sega something. Yeah, I mean, clean your shit. That's all I'm saying. Clean your stuff. Yeah, there's some spider webs in there. Did you see animals? Did you see the spiders? I mean, come on. Now here we have a master system. And let's take a look at this. There's some weirdness there. I don't really like how every time I open up a Sega console, all the caps are like all willy-nilly thrown around. And I don't understand why they used so many, I mean, like, this card connector here. This is for the Sega cards. These, I've always had to fix these for some people push them in too far and break the points. Break the solder joints. Anywho, this video is getting a little bit long. You can clean this board. Just wash it with water, non-mineralized water. You want to demineralize the water. Wash it down. Rinse it with alcohol. Use a toothbrush. Be very gentle. Mineralized water will create an electrical... See, the reason why water conducts electricity isn't the water itself. It's the minerals inside the water. So if you demineralize it, it no longer conducts electricity, making it safe to use with electronic circuit boards. Now here I am. Okay, so he's saying that PAL systems, which are subject to RF shielding regulations for sale, that's here in the United States too. The RF shielding doesn't affect the usability of the console. You just I mean, if it's rusty, you don't even really need to do anything. Just get rid of it. What's the problem? Plastics prone to yellowing due to high bromine content in their makeup are especially vulnerable to having excess heat and humidity accelerate the process. Yes, that's true. You could put that hydrogen peroxide. You take hydrogen peroxide, you pour it in a bowl. You take your console that's been yellowed, you put it in that bowl. Mind you, you want to take the electronic stuff out of it first. That should be obvious. You take the shell, you put it in the bowl, and you leave it in the sun. This will fix the yellowing and reinvigorate the plastic. It will harden it, because you'll see, like on Super Nintendos get super duper brittle when they turn yellow. I have fixed Super Nintendos like this, and I mean my Super Nintendo was like that, and I've been using it and it's fine. So maybe I've only done it a couple times. I don't have access to any of the other Super Nintendos I did it to, so maybe I could be wrong. I have a picture somewhere. I'll post it somewhere. I don't know. Out of this machine Locke has worked on, he says there are a few which crop up more often than most. The Sega CD Model 1 would most likely be the worst, and it even says that. Serial offender. Surface mount device capacitor failure on the main board can lead to erratic behavior, loss of functionality, or total system failure. Of course, don't let it get to that point. Typically, this also leads to rechargeable ML 2016 battery failing as a result. Okay, just replace it. The NEC 2405, 7805 design, voltage regulator overheats and can cause accelerated local component failure. Especially, okay, replace it. These are like 10-minute jobs. Like, everything he just described here could be fixed in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Replace it before it goes bad in 10 minutes. I mean, it'll take longer. It takes longer to take the console apart than it does to replace the surface mount capacitors with something of equal or better quality. Anything would be better quality than the ones in the Sega CD Model 1. Replacing the voltage regulator and replacing the battery, the rechargeable battery. You don't want to replace it with one that's not rechargeable because that'll lead to problems. But just replace the components in your old shit and you'll be fine. Okay. Outside of the Mega CD, Nintendo's famous 8-bit console is one of Locke's most regular repair jobs. The NES is plagued by oxidation and corrosion issues. That's bullshit. Resulting in deposited material inside the zero insertion force system on front-loading systems, especially occurring due to cartridge game pack storage and use conditions. Sadly, a culture of gamers blowing into their game pack... Okay, look. Yes, don't blow into your games, but here's the thing about the NES. In terms of fixing cartridge quote-unquote oxidation, all you need is Wyman's glass cooktop cleaner and a Q-tip, and you'll fix it in 5 seconds. 5 seconds. Literally 5 seconds. Just zip, zop, you're done. You take some alcohol, you get rid of that, you clean it all off real nice, you put it in your console, it'll work. Guaranteed. Here's an example. I'm going to turn on my NES with a copy of Zoda's Revenge that when I got it, did not work. Did not work at all. Because some jerk decided to... Oh, you know what? I should probably plug my NES into the wall. And flip the switch. I've been playing Genesis. I'm sorry. There it is. Look at this. I'm going to take the game out. Hear that? Oh, shit. It works again. And again. And again. See, I don't understand why this article exists. I mean, yes, it's good to understand what could go wrong with your consoles, but to portray these issues as a problem that can't be fixed by anybody and that you need a technological wizard to do it is not only disingenuous, it's outright scummy. I mean, like, imagine this article, like, I don't know, maybe I'm just crazy. It's a cultural practice with the NES to blow into your games. You just fix them. Here's a Master System for some reason. I don't know why they bring that up. Honestly, other than that, it looks fine. I mean, I don't have a good close-up of it, but I don't know, maybe the Tracy's are bad. And then this probably needs work, but yeah. So how does Locke go about bringing these machines back from the dead, or at least prolonging their lifespans? Typically, I like to do my homework first. I like to know the use history of a particular system if possible, who owned it before, has it been worked on previously, has it had faults before, if it has been stored, if so, where and how. This information could prove to be vital in getting an idea of what state the system is in before it arrives. It's better to have more information than none. I will admit that. That's true. But I mean, who cares about who owned it before? Like, has it been worked on previously is great, because you don't want to be working over somebody else's crappy fixes. Has it had faults before? That's great, that's understandable. Where has it been stored? I don't really care about that when I'm fixing a console. I just find the problems and fix them. I mean, I don't need to... The next step will usually involve some research into the system, known common issues. You should know that you should have that in your memory by now. You don't need to research the NES or the Master System even. Like, if you're a technological wizard, this should be something that you are extremely familiar with. Known common issues, locating a service manual if available. Why? I mean, the 2600 service manual has all kinds of incorrect information that... Well, I mean, it's not incorrect then, but it would be now. I mean, there are better solutions to repairing certain problems than what the service manuals written back then can provide us. Just saying. I mean, it's good to have a schematic, I'll definitely, but oftentimes even those are, like, unless you have a physical service manual, a lot of times the scans are bad. Um, if I open the unit and look at obvious signs of potential damage, natural and unnatural, this can act as a roadmap to a fault. If something is found immediately, it is checked to see if it could have any impact on what the user is reporting. Yes, you fix it even if it doesn't. That's part of your job. That's why they're paying you. With a cursory check excuse me, with the cursory checkout of the way the meat and the work can begin. Next is on to general checks for the condition of component health, checking fuses, DC input connectors, power trigger. Good, okay, yeah, you definitely want to do this. Whether there is no resistance or incredibly low resistance between a voltage supply and ground. Some systems will fall into known fault category. Okay, is this any issues to do with voltage? Okay. So this is just going into troubleshooting, essentially. Like, oh, here's what I'm gonna do. Locke clearly does an incredible, thorough job. You only need to gaze at his Twitter feed to see all the photos he posts, to see the meticulous manner in which he restores these classic systems. But how much? Look, you can't not be meticulous in this kind of work, because if you miss even one thing, you're not going to be. It's not something to be admired because it's standard practice. You just do it because you have to. Again, another car analogy. If you want your car to run as good as it can, you have to be meticulous with it. You want to make sure your transmission fluid is nice and pink, or whatever color you want. You have to make sure your oil and your oil filter are changed regularly. You want to make sure your water's set. You want to make sure all the electrical systems and fuses are working perfectly. This is the same with a game console. It is. What is Commodore 64? I don't have. Oh yeah, okay. I don't have one of those. The big issues that occurs is when custom ICs fail. We currently see this with Nintendo PPU and CPU on the NES, Famicom, PPU 1, PPU 2, and CPU on NES, SNES. Yeah, I mean, this happens a lot. The SID chips on the Commodore 64 can literally be blown by plugging in the audio and video cables incorrectly. So, when you're using composite, but yeah, one thing that can fail on the NES more than anything else, and is most likely to fail before anything, that would render the system quote-unquote dead, would be the PPU, i.e. picture processing unit, or the CPU, the central processing unit. And even those can be changed. I have spares. I've never had to use them, but I have spares in the event that happens. And it's a really easy thing to replace. If you know how to desolder, you get a desoldering pump, you'll be fine. If you're afraid to do it, somebody's got to know close by. Indeed, the realization that these vintage systems, while seemingly abundant now, are slowly shrinking in number as more units develop faults, makes modern-day clones like the Super NT and Mega SG even more important. I agree with that, but I think you're over-exaggerating the problem. I don't think you're doing it for money, but I think you're really exaggerating here, because let's face it, this article is winding up, it seems. Yeah. This article is winding up, and I have to wind this up because I got to get ready for work. But maybe when you're writing an article, you should not take the Sega CD Model 1. The Sega CD Model 1, the most failure-prone retro gaming console this side of the Game Gear, and the Famicom Disk System as a measure of what fails and what doesn't in game consoles, because you could probably, like, it's like the Game Gear or the Famicom Disk System. You buy one on anywhere, it's not going to work. You have to fix it before it works. Excuse me again. That was rude. I apologize. Burping on camera. Ooh no. It's not gonna work. You have to know how to fix it. It's vital. Let me be frank, because when I got into retro game collecting 10 years ago, I already had experience repairing NES systems because I'd done it as a child. As a child, I would get on the internet and I would look up solutions to repairing NES things. Eventually, I learned how to disable the lockout chip, which, ballooned into basically fully restoring NES consoles every time I found them. And you just saw the reliability of my NES earlier, so you know that I'm being honest with you right now. The thing is, when you get into this kind of thing, you need to know this stuff. You need to have at least a slight understanding of hardware, caps, voltage regulators, things that are easily swapped out. It's important because, and I'm not saying that you need to do this in order to get into retro games. What I'm saying is that you need to get into this if you're getting into retro hardware. You can play retro games on any computer, anything. You can play them on the Wii. You can play them on your phone. There's like the Vita, I guess, that can do it. The 3DS, the Switch. You can play retro games on anything. But if you're going to get into the hardware, you need to understand the basics. You need to understand how to change a capacitor. You need to understand how to change... just solder. Learn how to solder. It's easy. It's not hard. It's super fun. Soldering is a great thing, and it makes you feel good, because once you put a new LED in your Sega Genesis because you broke that LED when you were a child, and now it's got a brand new one, and you could turn it on and you see that red light, there's nothing like that feeling in the world. Simple things. Simple things. Reflowing and fixing old Game Boy games that you haven't played since you were a kid because, it just suddenly died when you were a kid. Reflowing the solder on the chips and turning it on, and oh my god, there's Mega Man 4. It's so much more satisfying than complaining about, oh, woe is me, all my stuff's gonna die. You're capable of anything you want to be. This man is not a technological genius by any means. Yeah, because that would make me a technological genius, and I'm not a technological genius by any means. There are things that I probably got wrong talking to you about right now. But I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that this article, like he's saying, even with these steps or repair at the hands of a skilled technician like Luck, it becomes clear to myself, at least, that I've been taking my classic gaming hardware for granted. Yeah, don't take your stuff for granted. Now, the NES by far is probably immortal in the most classic sense of the word. Like, it's going to outlive me. That NES that I'm looking at right now is going to outlive me. But the reason why it's going to outlive me is because I take care of it. I treat it with respect. I don't put sandwiches in it. I don't blow in the games. And I do maintenance on it every 5 years. Do you see that reliability that I just showed you earlier? That is 5 years. I think I serviced it in 2016. So 3 years? Yeah. And again, look. Hold on. There's Mock Rider. There's Star Tropics 2. There's Kickle Cubicle. And if you're wondering why it's showing the sound test to Kickle Cubicle, it's because I have the family computer keyboard plugged into my NES. So for some reason it does that. But the point is, only you can make your game consoles and your old hardware as good as it can be, as reliable as you want it to be. You can't expect somebody else to do it, and you can't expect somebody else to tell you, even me, what's best for your game consoles. You have to go out and discover that yourself. This article here, it's good in the sense that it created a conversation, but it's bad in the sense that it's using a notoriously bad console as justification for, slight sensationalism. Your beloved game consoles are slowly but surely dying. Yeah, creepy crawlies living in your consoles definitely kill it. This could have been executed a lot better, but it gets the conversation rolling, and I think if it even once inspires somebody to learn how to fix these things, then it's done its job. However, you don't need to be dishonest about it and claim that replacing a 7805 is like a horrible, you unscrew it from the freaking heatsink and you desolder 3 things and then pull it off. And then you put the new one in and you screw that on. Well, you want to use thermal paste too, but the point is, if you can change a tire, you can change a cap. If you can change a light bulb, you can change a cap. It just takes a little bit of practice. And I believe that you can do it, and you should believe that you can do it. Anyway, I gotta go. I got work to do. I gotta go to work and fix printers. Freaking slot machine printers are the worst. They're so bad. Like, if this article was about slot machine printers and how bad the sensors are, ooh, I gotta go.